Hello. Sorry for the delay since my last video. I've got a new editor, so I'm trying to figure out the ins and outs of this technology. But in the meantime, I've been around the internet. I, I was watching a video it was um, At the Mic with Keith Melinak, who's a producer for Blaze TV, produces the Pat Gray Unleashed show. But on his side gig there, he had a young lady who's a journalist from Norway. As you can see, kind of I'm descended from Norwegians and a lot of the Viking heritage, so it caught my interest. So I was watching it, and she was talking about the uh, the increase in crime in Europe in general. She spoke a lot about Scandinavian countries and how it's become, well, the way she put it, it became downright dangerous just to live in your own country anymore. She talked about Sweden a lot. Sweden has been having a problem with rape gangs. And she's, you know, Keith Malinak asked her, after she told him some of the stuff that's been going on over there in Norway and Sweden, he says, whatever happened to, I mean, this is the home of the Vikings, you know, and she just flat out said, nah, the Vikings are dead. Now, someone who tries to, I stylize myself not as a Viking, but as someone with Viking heritage. And yeah, I know that Viking was more of a verb than it was a noun, but still, the the concept that's derived in most people's minds when you say Viking, that's kind of what I go after. But I listened more to what she was saying, that the heritage that I'd love to look at and point to and stylize myself after, she says is dead. And I began to wonder, well, what happened? My ancestors came over here just in the late 19th century, at the end of the 1800s. And I'm wondering, well, what happened to them? Did they all leave Norway? Because the way she described it, the Europeans and Norway and Sweden, there's it was a long progression from middle of the 20th century to now, or the end of the 19th century till now. She says the Europeans became gullible and unarmed, and then they allowed a violent culture into their countries. Now, when she says a violent culture, she's talking about the Middle Eastern gangs, the Syrian gangs that are in Norway, the Somalis, the all these. They come in. They have no intention of assimilating to the culture of the country they're in. We're seeing it here in our own country, coming through our southern border. I mean, we've got all sorts of ethnic groups coming through our southern border, not just Latin American, but we've got people from China, we've got people from Korea, we've got people from Middle East, from Africa, and they're coming in here, have no intention of assimilating, learning the language, you know, becoming becoming part of the society. They come in such big numbers that they grow in clusters, and they set up little pockets of their own country and their own culture and their own way of doing things, and have no intention of becoming part of the United States. That's far different from when, say, my ancestors came over here. My ancestors came from Norway and Sweden, and one of the first things they did, even the old folks, even the older generations came over, and the first thing they did was learn English. Now we've gotten to a point where the president of the United States had to sign an executive order saying English is the dominant language, is the national language in the United States. Until now, we didn't have that. But my ancestors knew you had to learn English. My grandmother, she had to wait till she was 5. She didn't speak any English until she went to school and learned the English language. Her parents had they they had an accent, and they maybe pronounced words wrong, but they took it upon themselves to learn the English language. That's just what you did when you immigrated. But they came over here and they built their farm, and my grandmother was born here, and my my mother was born here, my father was born here, my and I was born here, and we became part of the culture. But the ones that are coming across our borders now have no intention of. There's people that have been here for decades and can't speak a word of English. But that's what they're finding in Europe. They're coming across in such vast numbers that they form pockets within the society. And there's every country in Europe has no-go zones. That's places there you you don't want to enter because they're these small enclaves of just this one nationality. And if you go in there, the police won't even go in there. The police don't feel safe to go into a neighborhood or an area because none of their laws exist there. And we see it here. We've got there's been talk of small areas where Sharia law is the law of the land of the area. They live by Sharia law, which in many cases is counter our own laws, the laws of our Constitution, the laws that we have legislated. How did we get to this point? Europe is just a couple steps ahead of us. going down this road, you know. Even in the United States today, there's places, there's areas within our inner cities that you just don't go there because it's not American law. But it was really interesting to me. Well, interesting and saddening. And we've got people that are all upset about the deportations that are going on. Well, if you come to a country, number one, you break the law getting into the country, and then you set up an area where the laws of that country are irrelevant. That that ceases to be an immigration. That becomes an invasion. And everybody's all mad at Trump because he's deporting these people. Well, why shouldn't we? You invade our country, break our laws, abuse our citizens, and then expect the government to hand you stuff? But that's what this status has been up until now. The government has just handed them whatever they needed. They get a house, some cases a job, they get free education, they get health care. Some of these things, we got citizens that don't even have that. But we hand it to these people that break our laws to get in here and then snub their nose at our laws while they're here. When did this make sense? When did this start making sense? Because it doesn't make sense to me. When did we become like the Europeans, gullible and unarmed? That's another thing. Half our government wants to take our means of defending ourselves away from us. When did this make sense? When did this start making sense? I looked up this this journalist. Her name is Rebecca Misteregan, and she's from Norway. And I found her um on Rumble and a few things on YouTube, but most of the stuff, like the stuff on Rumble, it was all in Norwegian. And yeah, I love the Viking culture, but I'm trying to learn Norwegian, but I haven't quite got there yet. But the stuff that I've seen that she's done in English, yeah, we aren't getting the whole picture of what's going on in Europe. Somebody's blocking the flow there because the things that she's telling us about Europe and Norway in particular, you don't hear it. YouTube won't handle it. You'll only hear it on places like Rumble. I'd like to see her do more stuff in English because she speaks very good English. Another one that I um, watch is Bjorn Andreas Bull Hansen, and he's a self-styled Viking, and but he talks about everyday life and what's going on within Europe. He's an author, and personally, I'm waiting for his books to come out. He writes books on the Vikings, and I'm waiting for some of his books to come out. But he's another one that he's just basic common sense. I mean, the stuff that he talks about in his videos are seem just normal to me. The one difference between us is that I was raised Christian and he was, well, I don't know if he was raised pagan, but he considers himself a pagan, a modern day pagan. But the sense, see, the Vikings had a psychology that, you know, you honored your parents, you protected your family, you defended your land, you you honored your friendships. And that's all stuff that Christians believe also. I mean, I spent 10 years in the Marines, and we had a saying, God, country, corps, which corps, when you're not in the military anymore, you the corps was tantamount to your family. But you could also have family and corps at the same time. So God, country, family, God, country, corps. And those were the hierarchy of our beliefs. Our That's what we believed in. That's what we were willing to fight for. Our God, our country, and our core. God, country, or family. But now our society seems to be so intent on finding the differences between us. They have a different skin color than I have, or they they believe a different God than I do. They, whatever the difference is, they sleep with someone different than I would. You know, and we're finding all these ways to tear us apart, and in the country, that's what they're going after. You know, well, they go after all of them: God, country, and core, God, country, and family, and they're trying to separate them, tear them apart. We've been so divided the last 20 years. It has gotten. It seems like when we went into the 21st century, we were hit with a perfect storm of division, and it's tearing our country apart. Now we have a president who's trying to unify us, bring us back together, and that's refreshing. I'm just hoping that it's not too late. We're so intent on finding the things that divide us that we've totally overlooked the things that unite us. And we've got these small pockets of difference that are tearing us apart. And before we get involved in another thing that's been on the news today has been the war in Ukraine. Before we get involved in that, we've got to unify ourselves as a people first. We've got to bring our nation together before we start fighting a war in a foreign country. Another thing on the news the other day was Zelensky's visit to the White House to talk to President Trump, and he talked to J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, and the new powers in the White House. And I couldn't believe the hubris, the he was just he didn't show any respect. There was no respect there. He walked in there like he would have with Biden and just run the show. We need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. If it hadn't been for the United States, he would not have a country right now. That war would have been over in a week. But yet he comes here and tries to lecture the president and tell him what the United States has to do. No, the United States doesn't have to do anything. They can just step out of it and let Russia take you. At least Putin will come to the table and show respect. And then you can talk about your differences. Zelensky has no respect for anybody. And don't get me wrong, I'm not pro Putin either. Putin is a dictator. He wants to bring back the old Soviet Union. But Zelensky just came in there like, you know, totally disrespectful. And I mean, he went in there like he was going to teach us something. No, not when not when we're the only ones, the only reason your country is still in existence. You gotta take your lumps, and then we'll see what we can do for you. But if he's got to realize that if it wasn't for the United States and the billions that we've through Biden's lunacy, we've given that country billions, and that's the only reason they're in existence today. But we've gotten tired of he's doing it to all the other NATO countries too, because he wants NATO to get involved. And we, as far as the United States goes, we've got problems in our own country. We can't afford to be cleaning up everybody else's house either. We've got enough of. I mean, if Europe wants to defend them, that's their fight. But Europe has its own problems. Number one, most of their countries haven't got a defense to stand on. Poland is about the only one that has a halfway decent military and could take the fight to somebody. Otherwise, the rest of the countries they've all depended on the United States in NATO. It's the future is definitely interesting, kind of worrisome. Whether you're talking about Europe, whether you're talking about the United States, I mean, the world is starting to realize that the United States is not going to be mistreated anymore, abused anymore. But it was good to see. It's good to see the United States taking care of its own again, or have a leader that is worried about it, the American people first. And Mr. Reagan, I liked what she was saying. I want to see more of what she's talking about. I'm trying to learn Norwegian, but I haven't quite got there yet. But every once in a while, Keith Malinak has somebody on there that I enjoy listening to it. I enjoy the Pat Gray show too. So, but but that's the world that I've seen from my little patch of heaven here. But if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If if you have a comment on something I've said, if you disagree with something I said, or may see it in a different point of view, that's fine. Let me know what it is. Um, if you really like what you hear, subscribe. Now that I got it, hopefully this video editor will work for me and I can do more longer videos and maybe spread my wings a little. But that's to be seen. It's also got stuff where I can add um, stuff I've seen on the internet. Um, so maybe I can put little clips of something in there, make my videos longer. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you're interested in. You know, if you want to learn more about my Viking heritage, if you want to hear more about my background, if you want to know more about, you know, what my point of view is on whatever news topic or whatever piece of humanity you would wonder about, let me know. Um, but seeing I'm down about 45 seconds here, so like I said, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, give me a comment, give me a suggestion. I'm open to it all. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you like, what you dislike. But right now, until the next time, I guess I'll just say Semper Fi.